Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. I'm Daniel Ronberg, and in today's video, I'm gonna be reacting to Humphrey Yang's new video on how much money do you need to retire. Now, quick disclaimer, I don't know that much about Humphrey Yang. I've seen a little bit of his content that I really like a lot. Somebody sent me this video, so let's just dive in and let's see what he has to say, and let's see what my honest thoughts are. I have not seen this video yet, so this is gonna be fun. Let's jump in.
How much money do we actually need to retire? Do you know the number? Retirement is the state at which you never need to work again, and yet your money will last you the rest of your life. To answer how much we need to figure out 4 things about our own lives and then do some basic math. And by the end of this video, you should be able to figure out roughly what your number is. Starting with how much money you can safely withdraw without ever running out of money, there is a famous rule called the 4% rule. The 4% rule was invented some 30 years ago by a financial advisor, and what he figured out was that if you're retiring for a period of 30 years, that you can withdraw 4% of your retirement balance without ever running out of money every single year. Let's say you start with a $1 million portfolio in retirement. That means in the first year, you can withdraw 4% of that, or $40,000. Then the next year, you would take that baseline of $40,000, account for some inflation, at which he says it's 2%, and withdraw $40,000 and $800 in year 2. You would do this every single year until you retire, and the assumption that he made was that as long as your portfolio was made up of 50% stocks and 50% bonds, even in the worst performing stretches of the stock market history, you would never run out of money.
Okay, so right off the bat, I have to say, I really like how he talked about the inflation adjustment for the 4% rule. I feel like everybody misses that, so I really like that, and I also like the Big Short B-roll a lot too. So let's see where he's going with this.
The 4% rule then, it basically wants you to invest while you're living off of your cash. So ideally, the investing returns are actually accumulating while you're still withdrawing from that balance. The big assumption that he made about retiring was that retirement will last 30 years. And back in the 90s, this might have been true. You might be 65 years old and you just need your money to last until you're 95. However, these days, people really want to retire earlier, as well as life expectancies are getting a lot longer. So we actually need to plan for maybe 35 or 40, or some people even want to plan for 50 years of retirement.
Okay, again, I really like how he's touching on the fact that it's kind of antiquated to use 30 years. Now people are living much longer and you have to adjust it for appropriate life expectancies. The population of centurions is the fastest growing population on planet Earth, so I like where he's going with this.
So let me show you guys this chart, and it basically shows you a percentage of success of not running out of money depending on how long you need the money for and your asset allocation. Along the top row here, you can see is the asset allocation split, with 100/0 being a portfolio of 100% stocks and 0% bonds on the very left. And then 50/50 is 50% stocks and 50% bonds. And finally, ending on the very right, you can see a portfolio split of 0% stocks and 100% bonds. In the actual table results, we can see the success percentages. So 100% in this case in green would mean that there is absolutely no historical scenario that shows you would ever run out of money for the given time period and the asset allocation. So if you had a portfolio allocation of 50/50 in stocks and bonds and you withdrew 4% a year of a hypothetical balance every year for 15 years, there was no back-tested scenario that said you would ever run out of money. Now contrast this to a 50.54% score like at the bottom of the first column. That means according to all this historical scenarios, you have a 50.54% chance of running out of money before that time period of 70 years is up. If you had a 0% stock, 100% bond allocation, your portfolio would actually be fine up to year 25, where it still has a 99.92% success of never running out of money at a 4% withdrawal rate. But as you can see, after 50 years, there's virtually no chance you still have any money left based on historical data. Most successful allocations as well as success percentages are in the middle, a portfolio roughly divided between stocks and bonds with percentages greater than 90 to 92%.
Okay, so he's pointing out something really crucial there, that, you know, if you go to either extreme in terms of the balance, the asset allocation, you have scenarios where there's actually a high probability you run out of money after a certain amount of time, whether, you know, it's 100% out of the market or 100% in the market. So he's pointing that out. And he's also pointing out that some of those allocations in the middle of that chart that are more balanced have a higher percentage of time for a longer duration period of time.
So the takeaway of this chart and the 4% rule is that if we're looking to retire and have our money last 30 years, we should probably be in a stock and bond portfolio split of 50/50.
So right down the middle is what he's saying, which is he's getting to.
Now there is a similar chart that shows the 3% withdrawal rate, and I'll leave that up on the screen right now so you can pause and look at it. But in this chart, there's much more green. That just goes to show you that the lower your withdrawal rate, the longer you can make it last in most scenarios. And this also provides a lot of guidance for how your portfolio should be set up.
The Wall Street Journal just had a really similar article about this, and they said that a bulletproof withdrawal rate is 1.8% now. So it goes to show you, yeah, the less you take out, the more of a chance you have of success in retirement. And if you do the math on $1 million portfolio, you're taking out 1.8%, that's $18,000 a year off $1 million. So let's see where he's going with this and how maybe we can improve that withdrawal rate.
Now, recently, though, the 4% rule has come under a little bit of controversy. The original founder of the 4% rule has even updated his guidelines, saying that retirees should withdraw up to 4.5 or 5% of their retirement balance every year. He did that because, quote, he saw that many retirees were dying before spending down their savings. However, I don't think we should be adjusting our withdrawal rate higher. That kind of adds a little bit more risk when it comes to retirement, and I'd rather go to sleep erring on the conservative side, knowing that 100% I will be set for life. Like, imagine someone said to you, hey, 90% of the time you're not going to run out of money. That sounds really high, but 1 in 10 is still quite a lot of risk to take.
He's got a really good point there. Like, you know, you could imagine another way saying, you know, if you're on a plane and the pilot came on and said, hey, there's a 99% chance we're going to make it to our destination, that would create probably enough doubt for some people to get off the plane.
If you had a 1 in 10 chance of crashing your car every time you got into a car, you probably wouldn't want to take that risk, would you?
Okay, so I have to apologize to Humphrey. Like, I'm getting to a couple of his points before he's getting there. I love this content. I love what he's saying, and I think we're totally in alignment with what he's sharing. And I'm really enjoying this video so far.
I know it's not exactly the same thing here, but I can't help feeling really bad if an old lady wanted to retire and then all of a sudden she ran out of money, so she had to go back to work, or even worse, she had to ask her grandson to go win golf tournaments on her behalf because her house was being foreclosed on.
It's all in the head. Yeah, it's all in the head. It's all in the head.
Get off of me.
That's one of my favorite movies, by the way. I hope that you guys watch Happy Gilmore at some point in your life.
I love it. He just threw in a clip from Happy Gilmore. That was pretty funny. I'm really liking this so far.
For the sake of figuring out how much we need in retirement, I think the 4% rule is a pretty safe standard withdrawal rate. If you are feeling a little bit more on the conservative side, you can lower that to 3.5 or maybe 3% every single year. However, you're gonna need a lot more money to actually retire because when you withdraw less, you're gonna need a higher balance to start with. Figuring out your time horizon is a very personal process when it comes to retiring. Now, the earlier you want to retire, the more that you actually can't use the 4% rule. Quote, the 4% rule by definition is for a 30-year time horizon for retirement. You shouldn't use it for 50 years. And David Blanchett thinks it's actually a terrible idea. Let's pretend you want your money to last 40 or 50 years. When you extend the length of your retirement, there's a wider margin for error when it comes to your retirement portfolio. So let's look at the data from Morningstar here. This table depicts safe withdrawal rates based on asset allocations and how long we want the money to last. We can see that if we want our money to last 40 years, we're gonna need a portfolio weighting of 50-50 or 60-40, and our withdrawal rate should be 2.8%. This will give us a 90% chance success to have that money last that long. Now, I know earlier I said 90% is a bad success rate. However, this is just what Morningstar did. If you really wanted to err more on the conservative side, you can probably even lower that to 2.5%. Now, this table is pretty fascinating. We can see that if we want our retirement to last only 10 or 15 years, that our withdrawal rates can actually be upwards of 69%, which is pretty cool as well. So you can see that the relationship between retiring and how much money you want to take out is going to depend on how long you want to retire for and how much money you're comfortable taking out every single year.
This section on time horizon is so important. I think it's really very important for people to take a look at their time horizon. And I love how he's showing different tables in relation to different people's goals. Like, not everybody has a 30-year retirement. Some people do need to prepare for longer, and some people, due to other circumstances, don't need to prepare as long. So I really like that he's showing that kind of difference between the relationship between the risk, the time horizon, and your objective. I think he's doing a really good job there.
So we're kind of starting to form a picture in our head of what retirement should look like. It's going to depend on how long we want to retire, what we're comfortable withdrawing every single year, and how much risk we want to take. If you really want to improve the chances that your money goes a long way without ever running out of money, Vanguard has a research paper that updates the 4% rule for retirees. In this paper, they found that if you're willing to employ what's called a dynamic spending strategy, that you dramatically increase the chances of having your money last longer in retirement. Dynamic spending basically means that when the stock market performs well, we spend a little bit more, and when the market performs bad, we spend less. That way, when the market rebounds, we capture more of the upside, allowing our money to go further in retirement and increasing our portfolio longevity. So how much more and how much less are we spending in this dynamic strategy? Well, the paper used a $1 million portfolio that returned a positive 10% return in one scenario, and in the second scenario, it returned negative 10%. They said that the example withdrawal in the positive return year would be $42,000, so slightly more than the 4% standard, and in the second scenario, you should be withdrawing $39,400, so $600 less than the 4% standard. I'll save you the boring math and I'll link the paper down below, but you can see with a dynamic spending strategy, so spending more when the market's doing well, gets you actually a probability of success of 90.3% compared to the normal 4% rule.
What he's talking about here, this is a cool paper from Vanguard. I would definitely want to check that out. But what he's talking about here is the order of returns risk, okay? And this is something that is talked a lot about in terms of pulling money out of a portfolio in retirement. It really depends on when you get your returns. If you have, horrible years in the early part of your retirement, you're going to need to take out less, or it can have a dramatic impact on those later years in retirement. And again, this is where Tom Hegna does a phenomenal job of talking about average rate of returns and order of returns are completely different. And when you're pulling money out of a portfolio, it really matters to pay attention to these order of returns you're receiving. So I think what he's describing that Vanguard has shared is a way to kind of try to manage to that risk. But again, we'll talk about some thoughts I have on that in a second. I want to see where he's going with this.
Another way that you can approach this is by having a large cash reserve. So, quote, experts recommend building this, a robust cash reserve, that can help shield you from having to withdraw money from a down portfolio.
A buffer asset, right? We talk about this all the time, having a buffer asset so you can take money out when maybe it's not as advantageous to take it from your portfolio. I think that this is nice that he's touched on this. I think this is part of the Vanguard paper he was referencing.
The expert keeps 2 years worth of expenses in cash as a buffer to ensure that he doesn't have to sell his investments for emergency cash during a market drawdown. Now, this is kind of a nice to have thing. Not many people are going to have 2 years worth of expenses saved up, and hopefully if they do have that much money, they have it in a high yield savings account, earning them some interest.
Okay, so this is where I talk a lot about what I call an abundance fund. I always talk about 12 months, but really it's whatever you need to feel comfortable. I think 12 months is really adequate for a lot of people to be able to maneuver and do things they need in case something happens unexpected. But I like that they're recommending 2 years. I think that's even more secure.
All right, so at this point, we figured out how much we can withdraw, how to possibly make that money last longer in retirement, but we're still missing that last piece of the equation, which is how much are we spending? By figuring out our spend, we're gonna figure out exactly how much money we need and then figure out steps to get there. So retirement spending is usually determined by what your pre-retirement income is and what your lifestyle is like. If you're used to eating fancy dinners and living on a doctor's salary, there's no surprise you're gonna need a lot more money than someone who has a much more modest career. Most people tend to try to maintain their standard of living, but there is an 80% rule that can provide some guidance on what you can afford in retirement. It basically states that whatever you're making on an annual basis, you're probably gonna plan to spend 80% of that in retirement. So if your salary is $100,000 a year before you retire, plan on spending $80,000 of that in retirement every year. Of course, this really depends on your income as well. People that make a little bit less will have to probably stick to this 80% rule, but if you make a lot more than say $100,000 per year, maybe you make $300,000, $400,000 per year, you don't really need to stick to an 80% rule because that would be a lot of expenses in retirement. Here's a great table from Fidelity that has a good suggestion on what rule you should be sticking to.
I will say I really like that he's pulling from different sources, Fidelity, Vanguard, Morningstar. He's taking a bunch of different great data and bringing it to you, which is really well done. And I gotta say I have to applaud the fact that he's done his research and pulled all these different resources together for us to view. It really helps support his point.
So for most people, we want to stick to a range between 55 and 80%. If you want to remain active in retirement and you want to travel the world and do fun experiences, then yeah, you're going to need a lot more money than someone who just wants to Netflix and chill at home in retirement and maybe do some gardening. So let me know what you guys would actually want to do in retirement because that's always fascinating to me, but your spend is going to be a dictation of what your lifestyle looks like. Now, one thing that's fascinating is that Fidelity actually did some data digging on how expenses change when we retire, and it's no surprise we spend a lot less money in retirement. Based on data from this Fidelity article, we can see that the average spending on food, entertainment, and transportation goes down as we age. Annual housing expenses also tend to decrease as we enter retirement because people start to downsize, they move to cheaper cost of living areas, or that's about the time when people pay off their mortgages. So the only expense for housing that most retirees have in retirement is insurance and taxes. The expense that does go up is healthcare, since as we get older, we start to face more and more health issues. It's unfortunately a flaw of the human body. We just get more problems as we get older. Like my back hurts a ton these days. However, right now it feels pretty good. I can't wait till the day that I can put my brain in a robot body and live forever.
I just have to say, he's just so authentic and he's very genuine. He's funny. I'm really enjoying this video.
You can expect to spend about 15% of your retirement expenses on healthcare alone. So with all the information about expenses, we're gonna have to figure out what our spend is going to be. That's something that's gonna be a little bit more personal to you. But once you figure out what your spend is and what your withdrawal rate is, we're gonna put all the steps together. Let's actually go through an example. Step number 1 is to determine our withdrawal rate depending on the information in this video. So say you wanna retire for 30 years, let's use 4%. Number 2, we'll determine our spending using the rules above. So let's say it's $75,000 in this case. Step 3 is to take that $75,000 and divide it by the safe withdrawal rate of 4%. So that will get you a balance of $1.875 million that you need to retire. And step number 4 is to use an online calculator to figure out how long it'll take there based on your investing returns, what your annual income is, how much you already have in your retirement account, as well as what your savings rate is. So I'll link this calculator down below, but you can see that if we need $1.875 million and our expected investment return is 7%, which is the average of the S&P 500, based on the stats that I have on the screen, it might take anywhere from 13 to 14 years to become financially independent and be able to retire. Feel free to play around with that calculator and figure out what your financial freedom number is. And once you hit that number, that doesn't mean you should stop being active with your finances. You may want to consider a dynamic spending approach when it comes to your finances in retirement. I hope that this video was helpful. Make sure to check out Hump Days, and I will see you guys in the next video.
Okay, so I really enjoyed that video. A couple things that I just want to touch on. I really think that Humphrey did an amazing job of bringing together relevant data and really organizing this. I love the calculator. I love the Hump Days newsletter. I'm going to sign up for that. I really thought the video was very well done. I will say that, I think this is part of the really common retirement approach that we see in America, right? It's like always about how can you have a diversified portfolio, when in fact, you know, the 60-40 portfolio just had its worst year in 100 years. I'm not saying that in any way to discredit anything in this video. I think he did an amazing job, and I think he's right on with all of his examples and his math and providing the tools and resources. I will say though, you know, one thing that I think is missing from content like this is just you can use an annuity to boost withdrawal rates. Like if it's all about withdrawal rates and you're trying to save to get to a certain number, his financial freedom number, that's what an annuity does. An annuity boosts withdrawal rates. So for example, if you put money into a deferred income annuity, you can actually just buy a much higher withdrawal rate of your initial principal, which could be as high as 5, 6, 7%. So again, that's what that tool is designed for, is cash flow in retirement and boosting sustainable withdrawal rates that you can even set up for you and your spouse for as long as you live. So it's really hard. Like he's saying, you got to predict when you're going to die. Well, no one knows when that's going to be. But a lifetime income annuity doesn't care when you're going to die. It's going to provide income for the rest of your life. That's what they do. And so again, I think if we could add that tool in, I'd love to see these scenarios with the lifetime income annuity to see where it can actually boost the success rate of these portfolios. Because actually, if you just allocate enough income to a lifetime income annuity, the chances of you running out, if you adjust it for inflation and remove the other key risks, is probably close to zero as well. So I'd love to see a model where someone can show, hey, this is exactly how long you could do the same withdrawal strategy if you add a lifetime income annuity to it. The other thing too is it makes the assumption that you need to use all of your money to be able to create that income. I think that's a very expensive approach. Like if you had $1 million and you're using this model, you have to use the whole $1 million, right? But that doesn't really leave a lot. Like they didn't talk about like, what about if you want to take trips, or what about if you have donations, or what if you need long-term care? Where does that fit in? Like I didn't see anything on that. It was all about just straight income adjusted for inflation. But there's other things that could happen, right? Like there was really no model for what happens if taxes go up, what happens if one of your spouses passed away, where your current income is at. So really that's where I think like it's good for like a basic like design for how to create retirement income and how to have an idea. But the reality is you really need to be able to, you know, set up things that can make sure that you're removing these other key risks. And like he talked about with, you know, order of returns risk, an annuity will help with that, right? It doesn't matter what returns you're getting. It's going to provide a steady income you can spend forever. The other thing was he talked about how the guy that created the 4% rule updated it because he felt like people were dying with money, and he felt like that was sad for seniors not to fully enjoy their money. There is a psychological and emotional impact to withdrawing money from a portfolio. And Tom Hegna, again, this is the guy who I've turned to for expertise on retirement income. He talks about living in just-in-case retirement. So again, you talk about what they call it dynamic spending. That sounds really good, but in the real world, is that practical that people are going to be able to spend that way? I think what will happen is, you know, if things are going well, they might not even spend then as well because they're just worried like, well, what if we need this money? We should save it just in case something comes up, right? Or maybe they don't take the trips or visit the kids or do something fun because, you know, you got to save this just in case. They delay satisfaction. A lifetime income annuity is going to provide you an income stream every single month. You can spend it confidently, giving yourself permission to enjoy. I think that's really crucial. So I would just add that little bit. I think it'd be fun to do some content and share ideas on that and actually build some models on what it would look like with the income annuity. But overall, really well done. I really like this content. I'm glad this video was sent to me. I'm going to subscribe. I hope those insights were helpful. Thanks so much for watching. I'm going to do more reaction videos. If you have any questions or want to give any input, please leave them in the comment section down below. I'm responding to every single one of those. And take a minute to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me to reach more people and make sure that I'm creating great content once a week on retirement. As always, I'm Daniel Ronberg. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.